Welcome back to the Business Intelligence Podcast. I am your host, Ryan McDaniel. Today's show has been powered by Quantico AI. There's a phrase that's been stuck in my head lately. The biggest cost in business isn't bad decisions, it's missed opportunities. Not the obvious mistakes, not the decisions that blow up in public, not the strategy error everyone sees on LinkedIn 3 months later. I'm talking about the opportunities that quietly disappear. The missed call that never gets returned, the lead that comes in after hours and sits there until morning, the referral you meant to follow up with but didn't, the person in your database who absolutely would have done business with you 6 months later if someone simply had stayed in touch, the inquiry that got routed incorrectly, the handoff that took too long, the message that sounded cold, rushed, or late, the window that was open for a moment and then shut. That's where an enormous amount of business is lost. Quietly, silently, and without a dramatic post-mortem. And I think one of the biggest things AI is starting to do in business is not replace people, it's eliminate missed opportunities. That, to me, is one of the most practical and most important use cases in the entire AI conversation. Because most businesses are not dying because they're making catastrophic decisions every day. They're bleeding out through operational gaps, through slowness, through inconsistency, through dropped balls, through weak follow-up, through moments of interest that were never captured at the right time. And what's fascinating is that a lot of those failures are not really failures of talent. They're failures of coverage, failures of timing, failures of systems, failures of being available when the moment mattered. That's what I want to talk about today, because I think we're entering a period where businesses that understand this early are going to look much smarter in hindsight than they do right now. And I think this matters especially in relationship-driven industries. Mortgage, real estate, financial services, home services, professional services. Any business where trust matters, timing matters, and customer intent is fragile. In those worlds, people tend to assume the big differentiator is persuasion. And sure, persuasion matters, but before persuasion ever has a chance to matter, one thing has to happen first. That opportunity has to stay alive. That's the part a lot of people miss. It doesn't matter how good your loan officer is if the lead never gets called back in time. It doesn't matter how strong your value proposition is if the inbound call goes unanswered. It doesn't matter how experienced your team is if your follow-up falls apart after the first touch. It doesn't matter how warm a referral is if nobody responds with urgency and competence. A lot of business is won or lost before the real sales skill even enters the picture. And that's why this episode matters. Because missed opportunities are one of the least glamorous topics in business. But they might be one of the most expensive. There's a reason speed has become such a central theme in modern business thinking. Deloitte's 2026 Global Human Capital Trends Report found that 7 in 10 business leaders say their primary competitive strategy over the next 3 years is to be fast and nimble. And Deloitte says the traditional growth curve is compressing as AI and workforce transformation accelerate change. That compression matters because when business cycles compress, the cost of slowness rises. And when the cost of slowness rises, missed opportunities multiply. A delayed response is no longer a minor inefficiency. It becomes a competitive vulnerability. A weak handoff is no longer an annoyance. It becomes a revenue leak. A forgotten follow-up is no longer just something to clean up later. It becomes a compounding loss. And customers are telling us pretty clearly that their patience is shrinking. Zendesk's 2026 CX Trends research says 74% of consumers now expect customer service to be available 24/7, and 88% expect faster response times than they did just 1 year ago. The same research also found that 74% of customers find it frustrating to have to repeat their story to different agents. That's a big deal, because it means the standard is changing in 2 directions at once. People want speed, and they want continuity. They don't just want someone to get back to them quickly. They want the business to remember who they are, what they asked, and where the conversation left off. That's exactly where so many missed opportunities happen. Not because nobody on the team cares, but because human beings are busy. They're in meetings, they're juggling priorities, they're switching between tabs, they're trying to remember details from 10 conversations ago. They're doing manual work they shouldn't even be doing in the first place. And in that environment, opportunities go dark. That's why I keep coming back to this idea that the biggest cost in business is not always visible. It's what never happened. The call that never got answered, the lead that never got nurtured, the deal that never got a second chance, the referral partner who lost confidence because the handoff felt slow, the old contact who would have been converted if anyone had re engaged them with relevance and timing. These are not dramatic losses, they're quiet losses, which makes them dangerous because quiet losses are easy to normalize. You can go years inside a company thinking, we just need more leads, when in reality, the problem's not always lead volume. Sometimes, the problem is that business failing to fully capture the intent it already generated. That's a much more uncomfortable truth. And it's one of the reasons the old speed to lead research has stayed so relevant all these years. The MIT and Inside Sales lead response study found that the odds of contacting a lead if called within 5 minutes versus 30 minutes dropped 100 times, and the odds of qualifying a lead dropped 21 times. Think about how insane that is. Not 10%, not 25%, not some cute little productivity bump. 100 times worse odds of making contact. 21 times worse odds of qualifying. That's not a sales technique issue. That's a timing issue. That's opportunity decay. That is interest cooling in real time. And if you work in mortgage, that should hit like a freight train. Because in mortgage, timing is everything. A borrower's motivation is not permanent. A refinance window is not permanent. A home search moment is not permanent. A referral partner's confidence is not permanent. These things move. They cool, they change, and when the speed of the business doesn't match the speed of customer intent, opportunities leak out. That is what AI is starting to change. At its best, AI is not magic. It's coverage. It's consistency. It's memory. It's immediacy. It's the ability to keep a moment alive long enough for the human side of the business to do what it does best. That's why I think missed opportunities are such a powerful lens for understanding AI. People often talk about AI in abstract terms: productivity, efficiency, automation, transformation. All of that is true in its own way, but missed opportunities is where the economic reality becomes very easy to understand. Because every business owner understands loss. Every sales leader understands leakage. Every operator understands that the thing that hurts most is not always the mistake you can see. It's the revenue you never knew you lost because the process was too slow, too manual, or too inconsistent to capture it. And this is not just happening in sales and service. One of the reasons I wanted to bring in outside examples for this episode is because the pattern is much bigger than lead response. Reuters reported in January that drug makers are already using AI to speed labor-intensive parts of clinical trials and regulatory submissions. Novartis said AI compressed what was typically a 4 to 6 week site selection process into a 2-hour meeting for a late-stage cardiovascular trial. And GSK said digital and AI tools helped cut manual work and trial enrollment costs enough to save about £8 million in a late-stage asthma study. Now, why does that matter here? Because that story is not really about pharma. It's about missed opportunities in slow setups. When system setup takes weeks instead of hours, opportunity is lost. When enrollment drags, opportunity is lost. When documentation bottlenecks delay movement, opportunity is lost. AI, in that case, is not some cute assistant. It's a force multiplier against delay. And that same pattern shows up in knowledge work too. The Thomson Reuters 2026 AI in Professional Services report found that 40% of respondents say their organizations are using Gen AI, up 22% from last year. Among professionals using it, more than 80% report using the tools at least weekly, and 87% say they believe Gen AI will be a central part of their workflow within the next 5 years. But only 18% say organizations collect ROI metrics around AI. That last number is especially interesting. because it tells you where we are. A lot of organizations know AI matters. A lot are already using it. Very few are measuring it well. So right now, we're in this strange in-between moment where businesses are adopting AI, but many still aren't framing the return correctly. And I think one of the clearest ways to frame that return is this. How many opportunities are no longer being missed? How many calls are now getting answered? How many inquiries are now getting responses in seconds instead of hours? How many dormant contacts are being reactivated? How many referral relationships are being protected through consistency? How many handoffs are no longer breaking? How many nights and weekends are no longer dead zones? That is real business value. And it's often more meaningful than generic talk about productivity, because productivity can feel abstract. Missed opportunity feels expensive, and the customer service world is seeing this in real time. Intercom said its 2026 Customer Service Transformation Report that teams are already experiencing early wins from AI in speed, efficiency, and their ability to serve customers across languages and time zones, and that these wins are helping teams gain capacity so they can deliver quality improvements. Again, notice the pattern: speed, coverage, capacity, quality. It's not just about reducing cost. That's about not dropping the moments that matter. And when you look at it that way, a lot of business challenges suddenly look very differently. Take missed calls. A missed call is usually treated as an inconvenience. But in many businesses, it's not an inconvenience. It's an intent signal. Somebody cared enough to stop what they were doing and reach out. That matters. That means there was a real moment of interest. Maybe they had a problem. Maybe they were ready to book. Maybe they wanted a quote. Maybe they had a question that would have become a sale. Maybe they were referred by someone you value. And if that call goes unanswered, what happens? Sometimes they leave a voicemail, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they try again, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they call the next company. The point is not that every missed call becomes lost revenue. The point is that every missed call creates unnecessary risk, and business is full of these unnecessary risks that we've just gotten used to. Late response is another one. People love to talk about sales as though it's mostly about what to say. And obviously, what to say matters, but in a lot of real world situations, when you say it matters more than what you say. If the first meaningful response comes too late, the quality of the message may not save you. Because speed itself communicates something. Responsiveness communicates attentiveness. Attentiveness communicates professionalism. Professionalism communicates trust. This is one of the reasons I think AI is also going to change how trust is built in business. Not by replacing real relationships, but by making businesses feel more present, more available, more on top of things, more competent, more reliable. And reliability is a trust signal. A business that always responds slowly does not feel trustworthy, even if the people inside it are great. A business that forgets follow-ups does not feel trustworthy, even if its intentions are good. A business that loses track of context does not feel trustworthy, even if it has smart people. Trust is not built only in the big moments. It's built in the operational texture of the relationship. That's where AI becomes quietly powerful. It can make the business feel like it has its act together, and that matters more than people realize. And then there's follow-up. This is where so much money dies. Not because companies don't know follow-up matters. Everyone knows follow-up matters. It dies because follow-up is easy to believe in and hard to sustain manually. That's the real issue. The first touch is easy. The second touch is possible. By the third, fourth, fifth, sixth touch, the whole thing usually collapses unless the business has real systems. That's one reason your database matters so much. Because a database is not just a storage container. It's a graveyard of unfinished timing. It's full of people who were not necessarily bad leads, they were just not ready at the exact moment you first talked to them. And because humans are busy and memory is imperfect, most businesses move on. They assume silence meant no opportunity. But often, silence just meant not now. That's a huge distinction. And AI changes the economics of not now. Because when follow-up becomes cheaper, faster, more consistent, and easier to personalize at scale, a giant category of previously uneconomical opportunities becomes worth working again. Old leads, old clients, old prospects, old referral relationships, old inquiries. That's where a lot of hidden value lives. Not because the business lacked demand, but because it lacked the operational stamina to stay present long enough. That is exactly the kind of missed opportunity problem AI is built to help solve. Now, I do want to say something important here. This is not an argument for blind automation, and I think that matters, because one reason some companies are still disappointed by AI is that they assumed it would be like an easy button. Reuters reported late last year that many businesses are still struggling to realize measurable returns from AI, with some executives telling Reuters that tools can be inconsistent, overly agreeable, or unreliable in domain specific work. That caution is healthy, because this episode is not about pretending AI solves everything. It doesn't. It can hallucinate, it can misread nuance, it can create bad experiences if it's deployed carelessly. And the Thomson Reuters report shows that many organizations still are not even measuring AI ROI properly. So, no, the message here is not throw AI at everything. The message is much smarter than that. Use AI where missed opportunities are currently being created by delay, inconsistency, and human overload. That is the right lens. Not where can I replace a person, but where are valuable moments dying because our systems are too manual, too fragmented, or too slow? That's a very different question, and I think it's the better one. Because when you start to ask that question, you start seeing opportunities everywhere. You start seeing the after hours inquiry that should have never waited until the morning. You start seeing the referral call that should have never gone to voicemail. You start seeing the web lead that should have gotten a response in seconds. You start seeing the database that should have been reactivated months ago. You start seeing the handoff that should have carried context forward instead of making the customer repeat everything. You start seeing the business less as a collection of departments and more as a chain of moments. Moments of intent, moments of trust, vulnerability, of decision. And a lot of growth comes down to whether those moments are captured or wasted. That's why I believe this topic is so fundamental. Because missed opportunities don't just hurt this quarter's numbers. They shape how a business feels in the market. A responsive business feels modern. An available business feels trustworthy. A business that remembers context feels professional. A business that follows up consistently feels serious. And a business that misses moments feels smaller than it really is. And that may be the most important line in this whole episode. A business that misses moments feels smaller than it really is. Because in the eyes of the customer, the market, and the referral partner, your company is not judged by your intentions. It's judged by your responsiveness, by your consistency, by your ability to be there when it counts. That is what AI is beginning to change. Not in a futuristic, theatrical way, in a quiet, economic way. It's starting to eliminate the dead air where opportunities used to disappear, and that is incredibly powerful. So when I think about AI in business, yes, I think about speed, yes, I think about productivity, and yes, I think about automation. But increasingly, I think about preservation, preserving intent, preserving momentum, referral confidence, preserving context, preserving the tiny windows where trust and revenue are actually created. That, to me, is a much more interesting way to talk about what's happening. Because if you get this right, the upside is not just that you work faster. It's that fewer good opportunities die for stupid reasons. And honestly, that may be one of the most valuable business upgrades available right now. The businesses that win in this next phase won't just be the ones that adopt AI for the sake of saying they adopted AI. They'll be the ones that use it to protect the moments that matter, to answer when others miss the call, to respond when others wait until tomorrow, to follow up when others forget, to re-engage when others move on too quickly, to keep context when others make the customer start over, to stay present when others go dark. That is not hype. That's operational leverage. And operational leverage, applied to the right moments, becomes revenue leverage. So yes, I believe the biggest cost in business is missed opportunities. And yes, I believe AI is quietly fixing more of them than most people realize. Not every one, not perfectly, not without human oversight, but enough to matter. Enough to shift expectations. Enough to widen the gap between businesses that are present and businesses that are merely busy. And I think that gap is only going to get bigger from here. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Business Intelligence Podcast. I've been your host, Ryan McDaniel. Today's episode has been powered by Quantico AI. To learn more about Quantico or to schedule a call with the team to see how our technology could fit in your business, please take a look at the links in the description. We're always down for a great conversation. And if you're new here, I genuinely appreciate you liking and subscribing. It helps more business leaders stay ahead of what's coming with AI. And finally, I want to reassure you of one thing. If you're hearing my voice, you're not late. You're early. We're going to figure this out together. I'll see you soon.